Welcome to Gotta Run with Will. My name is Janelle Hartman, and I'm going to be the guest host today of the show. Today, I have two amazing guests. I have Kelly Herron and Emily May. And not only do I have two great guests, I have a studio audience over here. So this is going to be, yes, thank you. It is going to be an awesome morning, and so we're going to take time just to talk about runner safety awareness. This is Runner Safety Awareness Week in New York, and this is our second annual one that has been held by the Run Collective, managed by John Honderkamp. So ladies, thank you so much. I'm going to be asking you many questions about safety. And so we're going to start, first of all, you need to get to know who our guests are. So first guest is Kelly Herron, and you are from the organization Not Today. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Not Today is a platform through which I share my story of survival and encourage other, mainly women and runners, to take a self-defense class, because that's how I survived, and I think it's an important life skill to have.
Yes. I'm going to be asking you about your story, of course, and you're going to be telling us a little bit about your story of survival and how it impacted really your whole life, your whole trajectory of what you do as a person, and also how you've affected so many others in helping them become safe. But we also want to introduce your co-guest, Emily May. Emily May is from the Hollaback organization. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so Hollaback is an organization working to end harassment in all of its forms, including harassment while running. So we're very excited to be here today and to have this conversation.
Well, thank you. So obviously we have two guests that understand the subject very well. Now, Kelly, you have told this story numerous times on numerous platforms. Even this morning you were on another news channel. You have done podcasts. You have done interviews. And I understand there's even a possible documentary coming out soon?
That is correct.
Okay. So this story, which you've told many times, is not an easy one. It's a story that we don't take lightly. But could you just tell us a little bit what happened to you approximately 4 years ago?
Yes, so I was training for my first marathon. This was in 2017, and I was 10 weeks into training, had my first double-digit run, which is pretty intimidating when you've never run 10 miles before. And I had been running the same 3-mile loop and wanted to change things up. So I looked at my weather app to see when the warmest part of the day was. This was March 5th in Seattle, and it was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday, high of 38 degrees, raining sideways, and that was the best window of time to go. So I went down to a public beach called Golden Gardens, very beautiful part of Seattle, and it was 4.5 miles away, so kind of the perfect turnaround point. And when I got down to the beach, there was really no one there, and I kind of felt like, oh man, I'm a badass for being out here. Took some pictures for Instagram and went to use the bathroom, which was at the end of the park. I realized that my GPS on my Garmin was still ticking, so I wanted to be fast. And this is your typical beach bathroom: concrete floor, sand, water, steel toilets. It looks like kind of like a prison cell, not a place you want to spend much time. So I was trying to be quick. Unbeknownst to me, there was a level 3 sex offender hiding in a stall. Level 3 being the most likely to reoffend. And I washed my hands and I put my hands under the hand dryer, and when that noise started, I got a chill up my spine and realized something was wrong. I turned around, and right in front of me was a straight out of the movies bad guy. Had his hoodie pulled up. He looked kind of crazy. He smelled absolutely terrible. And my mind kind of went through this checklist of things that weren't right, and I realized I was in a threatening situation. He lunged at me like a bear, and I was sort of backed into a corner. And thankfully, I had taken a self-defense class just 3 weeks prior, so the information was pretty fresh. And one of the things I remembered was to be loud and fight hard. So just kind of puff yourself up, just like they do in nature. and that can often deter an attacker when you show them that you're going to put up a fight. So the first words out of my mouth were, "Not today, mother bleeper." And for the next 6 to 8 minutes, we had an all-out brawl, a very violent encounter, and it was an attempted rape situation. I just fought with every fiber of my being, and on my shirt is actually the GPS of what was going on during that 6 minutes. I started to lose hope at one point. It's very exhausting. But just as I was starting to kind of fade, I heard this voice in my head, and it's the same voice that I've heard at the end of a half marathon when you have like 0.2 to go and you're just exhausted. And it said, "Come on, Kel, you have got this. Do not quit. Go hard." And I got one last surge of adrenaline and was able to escape. So that changed my life. And the picture that I took, that I put on Instagram to my handful of followers, went viral. And Run Kiwi Run, my Instagram name, would become an integral part of, it would later define me. So it was definitely an event that changed my life.
It was your resiliency that got you through that you kept going. And Emily, I am sure that you have heard so many stories, because you listen to stories such as Kelly's, sometimes not always maybe as come out as well as hers did, where she was able to fight off her attacker. You did suffer some injury. Tell us a little bit about the injuries that you did suffer.
I did. I have a scar above my eye. I had deep black and blue contusions all down the left side of my body. I only had one hand to fight with, but it saved my life using that one hand. And I had a lumbar spine injury, had a limp for about 4 or 5 months, but I was determined to push through that and continue training. I didn't want my attacker to take anything from me.
Emily, I want to turn to you. What would be some of your thoughts about just listening to Kelly's story and how it resonates with you and your organization, and how I'm sure one of the major things that you want to do is prevent a situation such as hers?
First off, before we even get into that, I mean, thank you so much for sharing your story. It is such, I understand, it's such a hard thing to do, right? And to be able to come out of a situation like that, so many of us just want to pretend like nothing happened, right? And move on with our lives. And to use your story to educate and help others, to show others who've been through what you've been through or similar things that they're not alone, is a deeply powerful thing. So I just want to thank you for your courage.
Thank you.
Hollaback, we have received over 15,000 stories of harassment and assault, and many of them happening in public spaces, just like that beautiful park that you were in. What we've seen, story after story, is that these are the things that we don't forget. These are the things that reshape our lives, our understanding of ourselves, and sometimes for good, right? Sometimes we learn how strong we actually are, how powerful we actually are, and sometimes in ways that are hard, right? I mean, Kelly's an incredible example of resilience in the face of trauma, but we have to be real about the fact that not everyone is going to have Kelly's response to this. Many of us are going to be struggling with it in ways that are seen and unseen, and running from it, their entire lives. And that is just as real and just as normal. And so, I think a big part of my work in this world is helping people deeply understand that what they went through isn't their fault, right? It does not matter that, you happen to be the only one that was out that day, right? None of it matters, right? You didn't deserve to be treated that way, right? If it's raining sideways, if it's a beautiful day, if it's 40 degrees, if it's 80 degrees, if you're wearing a t-shirt, if you're wearing a tank top, it doesn't matter. right?
Yeah.
You still deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. You deserve to be safe. And I think, we are taught so often in society that that we must have been asking for it in some way, shape, or form, and no one ever asks for this.
Right. The victim blaming, the myth, I would imagine, Emily and Kelly, you've heard so many times, and I'm sure people still ask you questions years later.
There's a lot of unsolicited advice that I get from the internet, we'll just say, of what I should have done.
Yeah.
But the reality is, you can only do what you don't know how you're going to respond until you're in that situation.
Right.
And when you're fighting for your life, you do what feels right because your survival instinct is trying to help you live. So I struggled a lot in the beginning with what I should have done differently. But in retrospect, and honestly through trauma therapy, I've realized I actually did everything I could, and I think I did everything right. So I'm able to walk away from this experience and see that I'm strong, whereas early on I walked away feeling more of a victim, but that evolved into feeling like a survivor.
Is there anything, Emily, you would add about the idea of how people can feel when they've gone through an event like this to the second guessing? Is there anything about the second guessing that you help out, or any advice you give to people who come in and say, listen, well, maybe I should have done this, or I should have done that? How does somebody who maybe has a friend or they've gone through it themselves in the middle of that real painful second guessing and maybe self-deprecating place of saying, I blew it. I took this, I did this, which you didn't, clearly, obviously beat yourself up. This guy was a predator, Any advice on that?
Yeah, I think it's so natural for us to want to second guess ourselves because society is second guessing us. It's like, well, what did you do? You must have deserved this in some way. Or, even your story where you survived, right? You survived against the odds. We still hear people, with your story, with similar stories, second guessing themselves. And I think it comes from this desire to want to have some sense of control over what our lives and what we've been through, right? If it was what I was wearing, or it was the fact that, the time of the day or where I was, right? Then I can control for those factors. I can wear different things, I can go out different times a day with different kinds of people, right? But if it just happened to be that I am unsafe because I'm a woman, right? I can't change that easily anyway, right? If it happens to be that I am unsafe because whatever, right? I'm a person of color, I'm LGBTQ, right? All of that is scary, really deeply scary. It's almost better to blame yourself, right? Because you believe you might have control over your outcome.
Yeah, I think the control part is the one that I think, especially New Yorkers, we like to control everything, especially, and I'm going to talk a lot, Kelly, about New York because, I'm one of those. But Emily, your organization, Hollaback, is based in Brooklyn, so you work a lot with people from New York. So you're kind of used to sort of how we also try to do whatever it is that we want to do and control our scenarios. But there really isn't. Some of the statistics that have come out of this Runner Safety Week, for example, the fact that 30% of women who run report that they actually have been either followed or harassed on some level. So this education needs to start early. It needs to start more often. And I think it's pretty cool that Run Collective, which has done this entire week of so many events, but look for next year's also Run Safety Awareness Week so that people can get involved. But as you say, your situation happened in Seattle. And back in 2016, 3 women attacked and killed in a matter of 9 days who were just going out for a run, one of which was just right here in Queens in the Howard Beach area. And also 5 p.m., not going at some crazy hours, everyone looking for the excuses of the control piece of it. But what is good is that we're starting to talk about it more again and realize that there's things that we can do. So let's talk a little bit about self-defense. I got to watch you in action last night. I got to try some things out.
Yeah.
I'm not a young woman. I'm 57, not as agile as I'd like to be, but everything that we did last night in that self-defense class, I pretty much can do. So that was very empowering for me, that I can do things. And one of the things that you talked about was one of the techniques you said, this is what I used, and it was called the tantrum. Can you tell us a little about the tantrum
Sure.
punch?
So yeah, we learned a variety of different punches and kicks, and my personal favorite is the one that saved my life. And the way that I learned it in the initial class I took was put hard bones into soft, fleshy places. So this forearm bone here is very sharp, and it's like being hit with a baseball bat. So you can really use this. I was pinned for the majority of this, but when I got this arm free, I just went to town, just bashing this guy in the side of the head. If you've ever been hit in the ear, it's extremely painful. And I beat the crap out of him. When he came out of the bathroom, his booking photo, I am very proud of. He's thrashed.
Yeah.
I hope that night that the words "not today, mother effer" were ringing through his head. But the tantrum. Do what you can. Self-defense is not pretty. It does not go down in the scenarios like it does in class where you're in your athletic stance and you're ready and the groin shot. Like, you just do what you can. And often, for me, I had one tool, and I used it to claw and I used it to tantrum, and that was enough. That bought me enough time to escape. The self-defense class that I had taken prior to the incident, my employer actually brought it to the workplace, and I think that's so important because, human resources people can bring in Taco Tuesday, and everyone gets a taco and has a nice lunch. But you can also bring in a class that will teach them skills that could save their life. And it was a 2-hour class, of which 90 minutes were spent just talking about boundaries and awareness, and then we did some striking, and I was terrified to go hit the pads. Like, I was embarrassed, but I later realized this is the safe place to do it. Like, okay, you might feel silly, but in an emergency, in a crisis, people do not rise to the occasion. We only fall back on what we have practiced. The body cannot go where the mind has not been. So by taking a self-defense class, you're giving yourself that foundational knowledge that you can recall when you actually have to put it into play.
That was you taking your own ability to take back and take in control of the situation as best you could, and defending yourself.
Yes.
But also part of your organization, Emily, it's twofold, and I think that's also why we're calling it Runner Safety Awareness. It's being a good run citizen, but even just being a good citizen. So, as I said, New York is such an interesting place, and we have a lot of people here. Being involved with each other is always an interesting scenario. So, Emily, can you tell us a little bit about Bystander?
Bystander intervention.
Intervention, yes, please.
Yeah. Some of learning, how to take care of yourself is, as you said, right? It's self-defense, right? It's all of those pieces, learning to trust your instincts. But also, it shouldn't just be on people who experience a lot of harassment to take care of themselves. All of us as a community should be working to take care of each other. And so bystander intervention is just that. right? It is, what do you do if you see somebody experiencing sexual harassment, assault, right? How can you show up into that? And so at Hollaback, we have what we call the 5 Ds of bystander intervention. So I'll go through them briefly. One of them is to create a distraction, right? So to do anything, whether you're breaking out into song or dance, whether you're asking, somebody for directions, right? Whatever it is, to break up the moment and de-escalate the situation. The second one is direct intervention. So that's often what we think about. But when we think about it, we think about swooping in and in our superhero spandex and beating everybody up.
Right.
That's not actually what I'm going to recommend. What I recommend is if you're going to directly intervene in a situation of harassment, that you set that boundary firmly with the person who is doing the harassment, and then you turn to the person who's experiencing the harassment and take care of them. You don't want to escalate, get in a back and forth, go on a monologue about what women have to go through in this city, right?
Yeah.
You just want to set that boundary. The third one is document. So that's if something else is already being done, the person's already being taken care of in another way. You can document the incident so that there is some sort of record. What you want to do with that, though, is to make sure the person experiencing it has control over what happens to it next, right? So you don't want your trauma to go viral without your permission.
Right.
The next one is delay. So with delay, that's after the incident is over. Sometimes these things are quick, right? You're quickly groped. We hear a lot of stories of runners being groped by cyclists who will come along behind them from behind and grab them. So that's something that's over, right? The cyclist is gone, the person's standing there horrified, but they still need to be taken care of, right? So if you were to see that happening as a fellow runner or park attendee, right, just asking them if they were okay makes a huge difference, because when people see that something happens, there are all these people around, nobody took care of me, it actually makes the incident worse and increases the trauma around it. And then the last one is delegate, right? So in Kelly's, story, I probably wouldn't feel comfortable directly intervening, right? But I could delegate in some way, shape, or form, right? And that's me, right? I'm a woman. I'm kind of wimpy. I'm not very strong. If I was like a strapping dude, energetically, I would have thrown down for you, Kelly. But you can always delegate, right? So, it could mean if nobody's there, calling 911. Certainly, we do encourage people, if they're able, in your incident, 911 would have been an obvious choice. But if you're able to check in with that person, everyone, has different kinds of relationships with the police. Some people don't necessarily feel more safe with them there, particularly if it's a form of verbal harassment, for example. But finding somebody else in the park to intervene, a security guard or park ranger, right? All of these are options that you can use. The point is, you don't have to do everything. It's not like you show up as a superhero or you don't show up at all. There are little things that all of us can do to take care of each other.
Now, Kelly, you actually did delegate or needed to delegate when you finally were able to get out of the bathroom. Can you tell a little bit about what happened?
I was surprised when I got out of the bathroom, there were 3 people standing outside. Right outside.
Yeah.
And I had some words. Couldn't you hear me?
Yeah.
Call 911.
Yeah.
And in their defense, there were 2 young girls who were maybe 14 or 15, and there was an older woman who was just sort of in shock and didn't have a phone, but they could hear me, and I wish someone would have just opened the door.
Yeah.
But as I was on the phone with 911, and I was very beat up. I didn't realize. They were like, "Are you hurt?" I was like, "I don't know. Am I hurt?" And the girl was like, "Yeah, your face." But a guy walked by and he had a beard and a backpack. He asked if I was okay. He was shaken, he cared, and it meant so much. He said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm okay. Do you have a carabiner," which is like one of those clippy thingies on a keychain, 99 cents. And my assailant was still in the restroom, and it had like a latch, kind of that you'd put like a padlock through. So we latched it and we put a carabiner on it, and so he was trapped in there until police arrived. One of the things that I love that Run Collective is doing is this idea of being an upstander as opposed to a bystander, and I'm so grateful for that guy who just cared, but then also was able to make me feel safe after 8 minutes of hell. So there's definitely things people can do, and if do something.
So Kelly, unfortunately, this is not the first time that you have gone through something. And it's very important for us to understand that you actually went through this during an actual half marathon.
Yes. Races are my favorite because I feel very safe. I don't bring a self-defense weapon with me. There's other people on the course. You would think it's a safe place. I was running a half marathon, and this is in the Pacific Northwest and it was a women's race. So, you know, you have maybe 100 or 200 people spread out over 13 miles. I was alone. There was no one behind me, no one in front of me. And I had just run up a hill at mile 12.25, and I had, my splits were perfect. I was having a really great race. And this guy wasn't even a spectator. He was just a lurker. He was just lurking by the course, and he groped me. Really groped me. I mean, this was not a slap. This was a grope. For a second, I was like, what do I do? Like, do I finish the race, or do I pursue this? And I realized who I am and what I had to do. So I spun around on a heel and just chased him. And he was not expecting this whatsoever. And this time I learned, I just started yelling, assault, assault, so that people down the course would know why this guy is running. Because if I hadn't done that, then, and there's 100 women behind me, like, he's just going to do this again. These are the types of crimes that escalate. You know, people who steal cars stole a candy bar at some point. They see what they can get away with, and it just increases. And if I had let this guy get away with that, then what's going to happen to the next person? And what level is he going to take it to? And eventually he could turn into the monster who was hiding in a bathroom stall and attacked me. So yeah, I was definitely compelled to act on that. And I received a lot of victim blaming for that one, because here I am again. And I was accused of being a paid actor. I was like, where's my check? Like, who's paying me for this?
Right.
But it's crazy what people say and what they accuse you of. And I think it's, you know, it's one of those things I could have just let go, let it go. But I feel a sense of personal responsibility to take action and to stop these things. And I would encourage anyone who this happens to, as easy as it is to let it go home and move on with your life, you also have to think about what might that lead to, who's going to be next. I filed a report. He went to jail for at least a month, and now he has a record. And that's so important, because when my initial assailant went to court, they looked at his record. How many times has he done this before? So you have to make sure that these guys are getting a record if they're doing things, so that a judge or jury can see this is a pattern.
You did notify someone at the finish line, right?
I did. They had firemen giving out medals or necklaces or something, and I was pissed coming across the I was like, I can't believe this happened, you know. And so I told a firefighter, and I told the race director, and one of the course officials on a bike was able to get this reported. They found, you know, they tracked the guy down and filed the report. Right.
Because you didn't have him sort of tied up to the side of the road and with a note on him.
When I chased him, I had to chase him down a hill. And so I got to a point when I was like, I have to run back up this hill again.
Thanks a lot.
So once I saw that he had been kind of knocked down by a spectator, I finished the race and then went back to.
And I think that's great advice. You put it also in the hands of the people that are putting on the race.
Yes.
And I know that I volunteered quite a few at different races here in New York City. And one of the things that I know, that when I have volunteered, that I've read, that the security levels are much more than you ever actually see on the course. But it still doesn't mean that there may not be times where you're alone. I run in the back of the pack. I know alone, so I know that sometimes it can be just you and your wits and what you're going to do about it. But the interesting thing is that there's things like with you, when you're running Central Park, people say, well, where are you? It's 6 miles of thing. But you can actually look to your left or to your right and see on the poles where you are by the street number. So there's 7901 or 7902. And so if you, God forbid, have to call in or let somebody know that there's, somebody on the thing. I have a kind of a history of calling into the race communications at Roadrunners and saying, there's been an incident or something. So there are ways that people don't have to feel helpless that, I'm trying to run. Like you said, you had to gear yourself in the middle of, at the end of a half marathon, not even the middle of it, to find your way, and you did. Whether or not your critics on social media, which are always have an interesting way of talking to us, yes. I'm afraid to even ask Emily how she deals with all the critics on social media. People always have something to say about something, but knowing that you did what you needed to do, and you did it not only for yourself, but you did it for the running, for others, because you knew that this guy, knowing your experience, you weren't going to let it go away. You could have kept going and gone, there's a guy back, he's like, I don't know, 3 miles, and it could have been a hole trying to find him.
Yeah.
So you did. You took action. Runner Awareness Week is about is taking action. Taking action for others, taking action for yourself, and taking action that we keep each other safe. Not everyone wants us to run and have a great race. It's sad to say. It is sad to say that, unfortunately, there's things that we deal with in New York, and we say, well, we're New Yorkers, we should be able to handle it. But that's not necessarily true, Emily, is it?
No, it's not.
No matter, of course, when we talk about New Yorkers, I'm a 30-plus year New Yorker, but I wasn't born here. There's many people that have just arrived here, 6 months, a year, come from many countries, many states. So how do you help the new New Yorkers deal with the realities? Or what would you say, what would your advice be to a new New Yorker as far as being aware of staying safe, not only running, but just in general as a citizen?
I don't know if my advice would be so much different as it would be to somebody who's been here for 20 years.
Okay.
I once upon a time was a new New Yorker too, at the gentle age of 18, and started getting all kinds of comments. And I grew up as an avid watcher of Sesame Street. So when I was walking down the streets of New York City, I was like, we should all just say good morning to each other and, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I was very chatty. And one morning somebody actually said good morning to me. And I was like, oh, lovely. So I said, good morning.
Yeah.
And they said, in response, I want to bleep you in your bleep.
Yeah.
And I was like, right. And it was this jarring moment for me, right, to realize that. And I think, what I would tell myself then, what I wish I could have told myself then, is the same thing that unfortunately I still have to tell myself today, which is, this is not okay. You did not ask for this. Even going around and saying good morning to people is not asking for harassment, right? And you deserve to be safe right now, right? Very simple, not rocket science, but it is a huge framework shift, and it's a huge framework shift. And to add into that, you're not alone, right? And that. I think I thought, especially being a New Yorker, I was like, I'm going to be a New Yorker. I'm going to be tough, right? I'm a feminist. I'm super tough. And I think I mistook that for being tough as like pretending like it didn't hurt.
Yeah.
And what I realized over time is that actually being tough is admitting that it hurts. And if you want to be even tougher, you do something about it.
Yeah. And Kelly, you definitely, you're strong. This is a few years after the incident, but it hurt.
Sure. And
physically, emotionally.
You never fully recover. I'm different.
Yeah.
I'm different, and I'll never be the same. When you're traumatized, it takes away a feeling of safety. I used to be extremely hypervigilant for a long time, and now I'm a little bit more kind of relaxed. I'm not waiting for someone to jump out at me, but I mean, the thing that's been really helpful to me is talking to other survivors, and not just survivors of assault, but even people who have almost died. It changes you. And for me, I realized what's important and what's not. And, making X amount of dollars per year was not as important to me as spending time with my family. Being able to enjoy the weather. I lived in Seattle. It rains like 9 months a year. So when it's sunny, I want to go outside.
Yeah.
And it takes time. And the process of recovery is not linear. It's a lot like grief. It's a boomerang. You think you're okay, and then one day you're at a stoplight and you just have a complete breakdown. I think the key to getting through that is having someone you can trust, someone on your side, someone who can listen without judgment. And it's hard to know what to do for someone when they've experienced a trauma. Like, you want to reach out, but you don't know what to say. What do you say to someone who's gone through something horrible? And all you really have to do is just be there for them and listen without judgment. And when in doubt, leave some food outside their door, because when you're traumatized, something as simple as washing your hair, washing the dishes, and even figuring out how to put a meal together, all of that just, it goes away. So just being there for someone is enough.
And that's its own form of bystander intervention. If y'all see Kelly getting harassed online, I want a whole slew of $5 Starbucks gift cards rolling up in your inbox along with it. Because that's how you show taking care of other people. And for whatever reason, when it comes to sexual harassment, sexual assault, we freeze. If I was to have a medical emergency, you would know what to do. If I was to drop my hat on the subway stairs, somebody would be running after me. Miss, you forgot your hat, right? But you experience sexual harassment, sexual assault, people freeze, right? They stand paralyzed outside of the doors, right? They don't know how to show up into it. And sometimes it's those little things. We did research with Cornell University that showed of all the stories of harassment that we received onto the site, that as little as a knowing glance reduces trauma for people who experience harassment. But if you do nothing, it's not just like a neutral effect. It actually increases the trauma, you know? And we heard that echoed in your story, right? The people just standing there was like horrifying, right? And this one guy with his carabiner, right, who just really cares, is like everything, right? I mean, he didn't swoop in and save the day either, you know? He just cared. And that is so huge, right? And we have to remember that, you know, almost everybody in New York City is experiencing some form of being treated as less than, right? Or being treated as different just because of who they are, right? Women, people of color, LGBTQ folks, that's pretty much all New Yorkers. There's a couple others. So we have to figure out how to take care of each other.
So one of the people that really seems to take care of you amazingly, and I've seen woven through your whole story, of course, is your mom. So can we talk about mom?
Yeah, she's amazing. When she got the news, I mean, she was like pedal to the metal. She was there, and she's a doer. So when she came over, she cleaned, she cooked, she made me meals, she helped me, you know, get rid of old clutter and things like that. Because also, after trauma, you kind of have this desire to just get rid of, get rid of stuff.
Everything's tainted.
And so she was great. And I remember the first time that I went on a run that I enjoyed with my mom. It was a sunny day, and we were running, and I was like, oh my gosh, we're running 9.5-minute miles, which is really, it's just faster than we would normally run. But we felt great. We were having a great conversation, ran 6 or 7 miles. We went to the market. It was awesome. Like, I felt better. And she didn't make me run when I didn't want to. Like the first, you know, she let me just be in the dark. And then one day she just opened up the blinds and was like, okay, Kel, it's time. It's time to run. And when I deferred my original marathon to run Chicago instead, she joined me. We ran for Girls on the Run, which is a great charity. And she trained with me, and we ran the marathon together. She qualified for Boston, and so we'll be running Boston together this April. But she's been the key for my recovery, for sure.
She was running before you were running? Or how did that work out?
I always remember her running when I was little. We would ride our bikes while she would, like the neighborhood kids, she'd run and we'd ride bikes. When I started running, which was in 2015, she picked it up again as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so she had to also do something to let you know that you're okay.
Yep.
That it wasn't your fault. You didn't asked for this and that she loved you so much that she also was going to literally stay by your side, running alongside, stay by your side, and wasn't leaving you. And 26.2 miles, even if you run it very fast, takes a while, like even longer than this show is going to be. It's going to take a while, you know. So that's amazing. I think she's even older than me. She's
70.
Yeah, I love her. I remember the silver hair ladies, and it's amazing, you know, to see the resilience, also to see that you can continue to run, that you're, as a young person, can continue to do something into your older years and also continue to conquer the things that you do.
Absolutely.
One of the things you've said on several of your interviews is that the marathon training helped you understand how to get through your trauma. How would you connect marathon training and surviving trauma?
Okay, so really it was just that the assault was worse. And I got through that.
Okay.
So it was like, well, I got through that, so I can get through this.
Yeah.
And it's really, when you have the worst thing that's ever happened to you, that's the bar. Also, as I was running, the first 15 miles of the Chicago Marathon are amazing. But then it hurt. I mean, it hurts, and you've got 11.2 is
really
not a short distance to go.
Yeah.
So one thing I learned is people are so amazing and generous, and the support that I received was just like beyond what I would ever imagine. And even though there's people on the internet, you know, who has something to say, it's maybe 1%. Maybe. And so I really thought about those people who had supported me and believed in me, and that definitely got me through.
Right. And I'm sure, Emily, you would love to see the end of this issue. I mean, we'd all like to, we always talk about crime stopping and things ending, but it's an ongoing issue. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be out of a job anytime soon as far as making people aware of what they need to do.
Yeah. No, y'all want to put me out of a job, I'm ready.
Yeah. But yeah, so this ongoing issue. So Kelly, tell us about Not Today.
So my website is nottoday.run, and it has my story. That's where people can get the shirts if they want them, and find out what events and workshops are coming up.
That's great. That's great. So I think it's time for me to stop asking questions, and I have some great people over here in an audience who are going to ask questions now. So I think we're going to move to the Q&A part of our show. Studio audience, thank you for coming. So who's going to come up first and okay, we'll get started.
Hi. First, I'd like to thank you all for coming here. I enjoyed the discussion very much. I learned a lot. My question is both to Kelly and Emily. We're all runners here, and what is the one thing that you would like us to take away as something to protect us, to keep us safer against assault or harassment as we go about our runs and our daily life?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I wish there was like a magic answer. I wish I could tell you, oh, I know, if you just do this one thing, you know, then you can prevent harassment or assault. But ultimately, you know, because it's not your fault that these things happen, there is no perfect response, and it's not your responsibility to have a perfect response, right? That being said, you know, certainly trusting your instincts, knowing your boundaries, right? If something feels off, it likely is. I think is very important. And then knowing that there's, you know, options. You can ask somebody to help you. You can document the situation if you feel safe. You can directly say something to this person or point to this person if there are others around and say, that person in the red shirt is following me, right? So know that you have options, but ultimately, you know, a long part of this work is going to be healing, right? And taking the time to remember that you're awesome, you're worthy, and you deserve safety. So that's not one thing. That's a lot of things, but it takes a lot because it's not your fault. So taking care of yourself is going to be thing number one.
For me, my biggest nightmare was being attacked on the run. My specific fear was being too tired to fight back, which I can assure you, adrenaline is amazing, as is the will to live. But because it was my biggest fear, I wanted to prepare myself for what I would do in that situation. And that allowed me to run more confidently and to have some tools if I ever found myself in that situation, which I did. The other piece of advice I would give is you have to put on your own oxygen mask before you can help other people. So if it happens to you, if it happens to someone you know, self-care is just so important. Definitely my biggest regret about what I went through is I just kept pushing forward, and you've got to take care of yourself and get your mind right when something happens, because you're the only one who can really save yourself.
Thank you. I just want to give a shout out to my club also. I'm part of a Prospect Park Track Club, which is a sponsor of Runner Safety Awareness Week.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, my name is Linda.
There you go. Thanks, Linda. Thanks for your question.
I'll definitely give a shout out to November Project and New York Athletic Club and Off the Hook Track Club in Brooklyn, which I'm affiliated with. The beauty of New York is there's so many different running groups to be a part of. First, I want to thank Kelly for telling your story. By telling your story, you're making us all safer. But you do have to relive that story every time you tell it, and that has to take its toll. So we really, really appreciate you being willing to tell your story over and over again. I know we have you for a couple events this week. Some of the tips when you look at, at wear reflective gear, seems kind of obvious, look both ways, not be on your phone. Headphones, maybe use the ones that are bone conducting so you can still hear ambient noise. But one tip I don't really like hearing all the time, it's beauty of community, is, just run with the group, strength in numbers. Well, not everyone has a treadmill in their basement. People maybe they're single parents, they have multiple jobs, they have to run early in the morning. And running, and I do my best thinking when I'm running, so it's just on my own, as much as I love running in groups. So I really don't like hearing that's the only option. So talking about some of the things you can do to be more aware, and self-defense comes up, and that seems like an obvious skill set to bring into your toolbox. But I definitely heard some folks say, well, I shouldn't have to take a self-defense class. And I appreciate that sentiment as well, but unfortunately in today's day, there's some things that you can do to be safer. And I had a couple people talk last night at an event talking about the empowerment piece of self-defense and it being a skill, not just when you're running, just in general. So maybe talk about self-defense and maybe the pushback that people have towards it. Not that everyone has to take it, but maybe the empowerment piece and why it's, and again, I think you mentioned earlier, 90% of sometimes is not actually doing the physical, it's knowing your surroundings and keeping yourself safe. But maybe just talk about self-defense in some of the programs, Emily, that you're affiliated with, and why, if someone has some reservations about it, maybe how they can look at self-defense, not I shouldn't have to do this, but how it makes me safer and why I should be more willing to do something like that.
We don't at Hollaback teach self-defense, but I have to say I've been through self-defense classes, and for the ones that I've been through anyway, it's not karate tactics. It's more about knowing your own power, right? Knowing how to set a boundary. The part that I so vividly remember being a teenager in a self-defense class was practicing saying no from deep inside you over and over again. And this is something that you guys can all do at home, and I recommend that you try it. It's very interesting, especially for me, socialized as a girl, right? I was like, no, and then to feel that difference when it comes deep in you, right? To feel that power in yourself is amazing. And so, for those who are self-defense skeptics, I understand where you're coming from. Yeah, you should never have to use this stuff, but you should have access to that power within you and be able to easily pull that out, because the ability to say no and mean it will serve you in every area of your life.
I totally agree. And one of the exercises that I sometimes do in self-defense classes when people have a hard time finding that guttural no is to have them think about the person in their life who they would defend to the death. That person who you would jump in front of traffic for, take a bullet for. And to use that energy and imagine it reflecting back on yourself, and now it's your life, and you should be able and willing to fight as hard as you would for that special person who you're thinking of, and do that for yourself, because our lives are all we have, and we are worth fighting to the death for. And to really find that roar, that primal no, you know, and self-defense is the ultimate no. And yeah, I wish we didn't have to take self-defense classes. I wish it wasn't a problem, but that's not, your principles aren't going to save you in an emergency. And taking a class is fun.
Yes.
You're gonna laugh, you're gonna feel like a badass, and when you leave, your head's gonna be a little higher, you're gonna feel more empowered, and it's going to make you less likely to be a target simply because you know how to carry yourself.
Right.
Hi, my name is Carrie Ann, and I run with Harlem Run, and I want to thank Janelle, Emily, and Kelly for being here today. My question is for you, Kelly. First of all, what an amazing employer you had that provided this self-defense class for you.
Yes.
You said you used the Tantrum technique. What are some other techniques that you remember learning from that class that you feel would be helpful? I know in that situation it was that you said that was the one that really worked for you, but were there others that you know, have shared with other people to do if they were in a similar situation?
Yes, I always tell people, fight like a savage. Just fight with everything you've got. Pretend, like, fake it till you make it. I am not a very physically strong person, and when I said what I said, you know, the not today, it was like, it helped me to manifest that courage and puff myself up just like they do in nature. So just show them I'm not going down easily. If you want to rumble, like let's brawl. They are not expecting that, and it kind of scares them. So yeah, I think, you know, the power of the voice was really crucial for me. And in looking back, I would have liked to know how to do a rear headbutt. That would have saved me when he was on my back, or how to effectively do some elbows to the face or down to the groin. So I've learned some things since then. Whatever feels right in the moment is the best thing to do. Just like trusting your instincts is like, if something is wrong, feels wrong, it probably is. If something feels right, it probably is. So just go for it. Don't second guess yourself.
Right. It's excellent.
Hi, I'm Janet. I have a question for Emily. You spoke about the role of bystanders. And we've all heard the statistic, you can disagree if it's not correct, that most victims actually know their attackers. So how would you act as a bystander differently if you believed that this was a domestic violence situation and these were people who already knew each other?
Yeah, no, I think that's a valid concern. And when we do the training, we can actually get people to list out, like, give us all the reasons that bystander intervention is a bad idea, right? And let's talk about it. I think if you are concerned that these people know each other, that it is a domestic violence, you know, type of situation, a lot of times we recommend that you indirectly intervene instead of directly intervening, right? Because a direct intervention could mean that that person is then taking it out on their partner when they get home. But indirect intervention, things like delegating it to somebody else to intervene, things like creating a distraction, like in a grocery store, right? And you hear a mom like berating their child. Just going up to the child and being like, aren't you the cutest thing I've ever seen? You're gorgeous, right? De-escalates that situation. You know, other things like just checking in with the person afterwards, if you can pull them aside, starting a conversation with them, asking for directions. There's all kinds of ways that you can disrupt what's going on from what's happening without having to directly show up into it. You know, like for example, somebody could have come into that bathroom, right, and pulled a fire alarm, right? And that would have created a distraction that could have maybe been enough of a split second for you to get out.
Yep.
I have a question. She's coming on down for Kelly. Will you ever run the New York City Marathon? I kind of want you to run the New York City Marathon.
I've learned every time I run a marathon, I say I'm done.
Yeah.
So I've learned not to say never again.
Good.
But I think after Boston, maybe when I'm 50, I'm probably going to give it a decade or so.
No.
But so I'm not going to say no.
Okay.
But I am going to say not in the foreseeable near future. But it sounds amazing, and if I was going to run another one, it would either be New York, or I feel like I have some unfinished business in Chicago.
Sure. How many
Well, the
people?
New York one runs right by my house.
Yes.
So if you do,
There you go.
let me know. I'll be out there with a big sign for you.
All right. And how many in the audience have run New York City besides myself?
Oh my gosh.
So, I don't know. I'm thinking we win.
I'm Monica Sanchez. I'm not really a runner or part of a run club. I'm just a big fan of Gotta Run with Will. And my question is about the remark about victim shaming, which is actually another type of assault, but it's like unknown people. How did you react to that? Were you able to react to that? Because I feel that should be addressed somehow, but how can you?
Initially, I used to respond to the comments, or and I would even private message people, and almost every time they would write back and apologize.
Interesting.
But I learned to stop replying to the comments, and I even told my friends to stop replying to the comments because it feeds the algorithm that just makes it more prevalent. So I don't like it, I don't angry face it, I just, I let it go. Another interesting phenomenon that happens is with kind of trolls, I guess you could say, is if they see that someone has already shamed you, they'll leave it alone. They'll be like, oh, this has already been taken care of by someone, so I don't need to do any work here. So I just leave it alone, and I quit reading the comments unless it's my page or a friend, but I don't go on to like the news Facebook page and read what Joe Schmo thinks about me. I don't care. Yeah.
And that's a big component to self-care as well, and healing, right?
Absolutely.
Is that you do not have to listen to what everyone and their brother thinks about your experience. All that matters is how you understand it and how you understand yourself as a strong survivor.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I guess we're going to end our time together. It's been great. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you so much that you were able to both tell, not the easiest stories, your actual personal story of trauma and survivorship and going through that. And Emily, the fact that you listen as part of your job every day, people's trauma and having to sort of, that's hard to take home because it's, say leave your work at the office, not always. So both of you are doing a great work. Thank you, audience. We want to thank John Handekamp, again, Run Collective. And for John, do you want to just come up to the mic real quick and tell your website so people know how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, the Run Collective is really just the runcollective.com. And we were actually founded to bring people together to celebrate what we all do, mainly in running, and to support each other, whether it's various events and whether it's lights out in Prospect Park like it's been the last month, and we rally the troops around how getting that fixed because that's not safe.
Right.
But this topic came up the last 2 years and felt like we had to do something. So I appreciate for everyone who's here today and then continuing the conversation, because 1 week of this is not going to correct anything. But hopefully it moves the needle a little bit, and we're not going to go to 0 to 60, but if we can make some progress, then we've done something good. So thank you for being here.
Right, and also this is something that could be duplicated, not just in cities around in the country and around the world could be doing what you have been doing.
Yeah, this year we have events in Chicago, Boston, New Jersey, but anyone could do a Run Collective event. Citizen Run is getting together early in the morning and late at night, having some coffee afterwards, strength in numbers, but also making sure that folks that have to run or want to run by themselves have the freedom to do so in a way that's safe and no one deserves to be treated like this.
All right, correct. Well, thank you. I need to carry you with me. I like to be clapped for. Thank you so much. Well, I want to thank both of you for coming, for being a part of this, answering my questions. I don't do this for a living, but I do this on TV, so
there you go.
But I thank you so much for doing that. And of course, it's Will. How can I thank you for taking the time to ask me to be your guest host today? Gotta Run with Will. You can find it on YouTube, on the Manhattan and Neighborhood Network. Thank you again for everyone.